So I'm systematically going through a list of all the topics that you sent to me that you want to talk about. And I think it's a little bit easier, sometimes easier to understand, if we talk about them instead of me writing about them. So today I'm going to talk about birth plans, because that's something that if you're pregnant, you've either heard about, you've read about, a friend has told you that you must have, maybe your physician or care provider said, you know, we really don't want you to have that. It can be very confusing. Let me explain. A birth plan is generally a written paper, a couple of sheets of paper possibly, of all the things that you find important to you during your birth. They can consist of, you know, I'd really like to keep the baby with me all the time. I want to make sure I breastfeed. I don't want to be offered any medications. There's a lot of different things that can go into a birth plan. Why you're hearing different things, and why I personally am going to tell you that I find birth plans to be really more of a negative than a positive, is because there is absolutely nothing nowadays in 2010 that you could write on your birth plan that you could not also just talk to your practitioner about. And a lot of times you'll find birth plan templates on the internet that are very outdated, that will say things like, I don't want to have an IV, I want to be allowed to eat. Those are practices that very oftentimes now in hospitals aren't even done. So it can be misleading and make you think that a lot of things are going to happen to you in the hospital that actually aren't going to happen. The other thing that I will say is the bigger picture about birth plans is you can have the conversation with your practitioner and say, you know, I really would like to have a natural birth. And your practitioner will say, you know what, I don't have any problem with that. And you may have the conversation of, well, what if you find that you change your mind or you make a different choice in labor? And that's an important conversation to have. It's very important not to be especially rigid. The other thing is that a lot of times, in my experience, when someone comes in to have their baby and they have a very rigid birth plan, what that really is about is a lot of fear of losing control, of saying, I want to make sure that this birth is exactly like this. I want to make sure this happens. I don't want this to happen. I want that to happen. And the important thing to know about that is when you walk in to have a baby, you're embarking, or when you go into labor, you're embarking on a completely random act of nature. And to say, I want it to be this way, or I want it to be that way, or it's going to be better if it's this way, or not as good if that happens, is just setting yourself up for having expectations that cannot possibly be met. And I see that over and over again in that mindset of, it must be this way, it must be this way. And I always feel really sad. I was with a mom not so long ago who was very unhappy, and it took a long time for me to help her just relax the fact that it wasn't going as she planned. But of course she couldn't plan. She'd wanted to have labor start naturally. What happened was her water broke, and she didn't go into labor for a day. There came a time where it simply wasn't safe to not get labor going, and she resisted that for such a long time, and it took us a lot of energy to really talk through that. And I really want to help you before you go into labor to just know that you talk about what's important to you, but just for yourself to have the idea that I don't know what it's going to be like, and I'm going to roll with it, and these are important things to me, and absolutely that's valid, and you want the people around you to support that, but also to know that you want to not set yourself up for having expectations that may lead you to feel as though something failed, because it's really about having a baby.